So I'm Pete Leiden, and I am the founder of Reinvent. And what Reinvent, think of the way we think of what we do is we essentially try to bring together top innovators in deep conversations to try to solve complex challenges. The way we think, our kind of theory of change, think of it is that really, if you're going to get real innovation, real fundamental innovation, particularly at what we call reinvention, you got to get a lot of smart folks, innovative folks from different backgrounds in a room, in a conversation to go deep and long. And that's what we've kind of organized what we do. We also, though, create media off this. Because one of the things we think is if we had this kind of innovation, these kind of conversations behind closed doors, which is a lot of kind of strategy consulting and things like that, so much gets lost, it doesn't get absorbed. So what we try to do is we always try to capture everything in long form. And so today, one of the things about this meeting you're going to find right from the start is you're all going to be on video. It's a 4-camera shoot. You're on as much of the video as all of the people are going to be speaking up here. And that's part of the idea, because this room is filled with some really amazing folks. From the past, who's also the speaker at What's Now, is Kevin Kelly had a saying that I adopted as a younger editor in the early Wired magazine, which is nobody's as smart as everybody. And so what we've essentially done here is we've essentially created a project that's actually going to tap into many, many people in the Bay Area here to really think through this really problem of the future work. Now, the other thing about our Reinvent is we know we can't make an impact unless we have partners. And so every one of our major partnerships, we try to align with some company or foundation or organization that also wants to drive innovation in space. And in this case, for the future of work, it's Intuit. And a lot of what they do in their products is working with independent workers. And in fact, they've kind of seen this changing landscape. They're also trying to wrap their heads around where it's going. And so what they were really thought is, let's partner with us and actually underwrite an effort to really get some new thinking in this space. Now, what we've essentially going to do with this is the kickoff event of a year-long project. And the project is organized not just on the future work, but it's essentially focused on the independent worker. And over time, we started to think about what is the thing that we think the focal question of this project is, and what can be done now to ensure that all independent workers thrive in the years ahead. We thought that's an organizing principle for this project, and for that matter, for what we're going to be talking about today, that's really worthy of a lot more sustained effort. All workers, independent workers, thrive, not just survive in the years ahead. Now, we know there's a lot of work being done in this space by all kinds of folks, and it would just be dumb to replicate the efforts that are happening in other forums. And so we thought to kick off this project, we'd bring together, to kick off some thinking in this space, 8 folks who essentially have been doing work in this space or had organizations that are in this space, or in some cases literally have other gatherings or conferences or kind of meetings that essentially are bringing together people around this space. And so what we wanted them to do is to kind of tell us what they have learned and give us advice on where we should be going forward, and get everyone stimulated in the room about that. So, for example, what we basically said is 3 things that we'd like them to kind of think about and address in this meeting, which we're going to get to shortly. One is like, what are the most important things that you have learned in the last year about independent workers, the challenges and the opportunities that they face in the next 10 years? So we want to get, what would they want to throw into the mix here of what we should be thinking about? It doesn't have to be the typical thing, but what is something that they found really helpful? Secondly, where would you go in the next year here? Where do you think are the best places to apply new efforts in the coming year to accelerate a transition to systems that enable independent workers to thrive in the coming decade? In other words, give your advice now that everything you've learned about this space, where would you actually go next? And the final thing, which is another thing, is what's one question you would like answered soon that could help bring about a better future for independent workers, and that we could discuss actually in this gathering. Something they're wrestling with, a thing that they're trying to figure out, what would they do about that? And so what we're essentially going to do tonight is a kind of unusual gathering. Think of it, it's less of a show. We're not sitting here and going to basically present and everyone's just going to sit back and learn. It's actually, you're all going to be engaged in this thing. We're going to have a little bit of a context setting, so we're actually get on the same page. But then we're going to have a first conversation. We'll have 4 of these folks up. They're going to give 5 minutes of their stimulating kind of their thoughts on this. And they're going to talk amongst themselves with a moderated discussion, as well as roll into a conversation with you. We're going to do that twice. And then what we're going to do is take those questions that they've posed there in their kind of setups We're going to break out, essentially, later on, towards the end of the evening, go into different parts of the space here and actually have deeper conversations, more intimate conversations, each of them kind of being in the middle of a conversation around the question and around the stuff that they've teed up, the thoughts that they've teed up as well as that core question. Come back after that and start to think about next steps. Again, this meeting is less show, more strategy meeting in a way. And what we're really hoping to get here is to take away some collective thinking, some collective thoughts of where we can make the most use in the coming year. And again, not just for us, it's to spread it. This is all public. We're putting it out there. We want to share as much as possible. Now, to kind of, before we jump off here, I want to say, give one moment here to actually let our partner here, Cassie Devine here, from Intuit is just going to go up and say one word, and then we're going to move into you folks talking. So, Cassie, do you want to just say a word here?
I might say more than one word. I'm Cassie Devine. I lead a product team at Intuit focused on building tools for people who are self-employed. And Intuit's mission is to power prosperity around the world, and we've always been known as a consumer and small business company. In the last few years, we've put a lot of focus on a group of people who need our help to navigate the world of working for yourself. And we have a strategic focus as a company to bring peace of mind and prosperity to people working independently. But it is clear that is not a job for one company. It is not a job for one sector. And so we couldn't be more excited to kick off something with Reinvent to change the world that is today built for the steady paycheck and really empower a new set of people to really flourish and transform their own lives and our economies and our world. So very excited to be here and for all of you to join this journey with us. Thank you.
Now, as I mentioned, this is an unusual gathering. This isn't just random. Everyone here was invited, and we were actually getting people selectively to come here because really there's an incredible collective brain power in this group and collective kind of insights on what's happening in this future workspace. And so I'm going to introduce quickly here two of my cohorts here in the Future of Work project here. Oops, where we go here. April Rennie and actually Gary Bowles. And they are going to model for you what we're going to do with a few folks in the audience here, just to show the range of experiences and talent we have in the audience here. So April is going to have 30 seconds to actually talk a little bit about her, who she is, what she does, and what she brings, what we call brings to the table in terms of the future of work. We're going to do it in 30 seconds. She's going to be timed. Then Gary's going to do that, and then both of them are going to go into the audience, and we're going to actually pass the mic to a bunch of folks here just to get a sense of the range of experiences we have to work with here. So April, you have got 30 seconds.
Here we go.
And it's
Good
in the back.
evening, everyone. Delighted to be here. Some of you I know, many of you I don't. I am an independent advisor in this space that began as the sharing economy and the collaborative economy and then got into the on-demand economy and the gig economy, and now the future of work is a key theme that I focus on. And I work with startups, and I also work with governments and policymakers around the world on what we need to do to create a future of work that works for everyone.
Boom, 2 seconds.
She's good.
Gary.
All right. Hard act to follow. Thank you all for coming. My name is Gary Bowles. I've actually got two companies, and since the timer hasn't started, obviously I can just keep talking for forever.
There you go.
It's going to be a long night, folks. Anyway, with Charette LLC and my managing partner Heidi Kleinmaus, we say we'd like to help people to navigate, people and organizations to navigate disruptive change. And with our company, eParachute, built off the intellectual property of a book called What Color Is Your Parachute? My partner, Eric Barnett, is here in the room. We try to help individuals to be able to navigate disruptive change as well.
Boom, you got it. All right. Now, April's at with someone out there in the audience is going to say, pass the mic.
Indeed.
Oop. Oh, wait, I won't start yet.
Here we go.
Hi, I'm Caroline Oakles, and I work with Merchant Research, and we're in the East Bay, and we have been studying the future of small business over the last 12 years and have shifted smaller and smaller and smaller every single year. So for the last, since 2011, have really looked at the future of the independent workforce. And so we've been doing some segmentation work on that, trying to understand what motivates independent workers, what are their hurdles, and how can people help them succeed more at what they do.
Boom, we got someone over here.
Mr. Hirschberg.
Hi, I'm Peter Hirschberg. Over the last couple of years, Marcia Kabanoff and Dale Doherty and I worked with about 100 cities and wrote The Maker City. It's taking a look at how the principles of the maker movement, agency, new tools of production are kind of powering reinvention in cities. We're now developing a resilient jobs index and launched a partnership with U.S. News where we're kind of ranking every city on its kind of forward-looking economic development potential, which is a great way of building a movement around all this stuff.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucian Tarnowski. I'm founder of a company called Brave New. What we do is power knowledge-sharing communities for organizations and collaboratives, movements coming together that are trying to work collaboratively, work cooperatively across a whole ecosystem to create change. So we do a lot around healthcare. We help 650 healthcare organizations collaborate and share innovation to reform healthcare. We do a lot around education, helping redesign the US education system, because there's a lot of people involved in doing that. So thank you.
Boom, you guys are good.
I'm Mark Gomez with the Leap Forward project of the Haas Institute at UC Berkeley. I come out of Justice for Janitors organizing, which was an industry organizing campaign for contracted janitors, cleaning office buildings and high-tech facilities. And nowadays, we think about innovative wage, income, and asset policies, thinking towards creating a basic income, first in California, and then across the United States.
I'm Sandra Anderson. I'm a serial entrepreneur who has used the channels like Thumbtack and other avenues in which to gain employment, having left corporate America with an 18-year career with Charles Schwab.
I'm Jim Pugh. I'm a co-director of the Universal Income Project. We're looking to provoke a larger conversation on universal basic income in the United States and starting to explore policy solutions here in California with particular interest in understanding what basic income could do for different communities around the country, very much including independent workers and seeing how it might affect those folks.
You got some back there?
Felicia Kulosuri with the Center for the Edge at Deloitte. And we worked on the maker movement and a few other topics with Peter and Dale and others. And one of the topics I'm working on right now is how all these exponential technologies are going to drive increasing inequality and what we could do about it so we don't have another Trump and Brexit.
All right. A couple more, yeah, go ahead.
I'm Chris Shipley, and along with Heather McGowan, I speak, write, study, and consult with organizations about the future of work and workforce transformation. And along with that work over the last couple of years, probably the most interesting thing I've done is spend 4 months as an Uber driver. So I'm happy to share that experience.
Interesting. Here's someone up. We got one up here.
Hi, I'm Neil Gornflow. I'm the executive director of Shareable, and we write about and publish about the future of work. That's one of our coverage areas, and we do it from the perspective of workers. Like, what are workers doing to shape their own work experience? Forming new types of organizations like platform cooperatives, new working and living spaces, new ways to govern. New currencies, and the list goes on. So workers are, in our perspective, are shaping their own future in some important ways that we should pay more attention to. And we are wrapping this all up in a book called Sharing Cities, Activating the Urban Commons to look at this at the city scale.
Okay, a few more. We got one back here. Oh, good.
Hi. Sorry. I'm Lindsay Crumbaugh. I'm from Sama School, and we are a nonprofit that's focused exclusively actually on supporting low-income populations to leverage the independent work landscape. So what that means is providing training and support to re-enter the workforce for long-term unemployed, to build a digital CV so that they can actually leverage that to gain full-time experience. And we are in the process now of sort of rolling this out across the public workforce system here in San Francisco.
Awesome.
That's great.
Hi, my name is Carl Mehta. I'm a founder and CEO of a company called AdCast based here in Mountain View. The future of work is intertwined with the future of learning because we have a massive skills gap. And what we provide is an AI, artificial intelligence-driven, personalized learning platforms so people can upskill, cross-skill, and we offer that to Fortune 500 companies as well as any corporation. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Carmen Rojas and I run an organization called the Workers Lab. We are the nation's only labor-backed innovation laboratory trying to find ways to build power for working people outside of collective bargaining. So we've been exploring some solutions around contingent workers, but we're looking broadly at things like co-op development, ESOPs, trying to find the ways that technology can be helpful in building power for workers in the 21st century economy.
Hi, I'm Mark Prensky. I do civilization-level change in education, trying to reimagine what education would look like for our newly empowered kids if we didn't have to start with the past. And I'm not inventing it, I'm curating it, it's coming bottoms up, and it's going to be very different and much better for our kids.
Shufina English from the California Association for Micro Enterprise Opportunity, also known as Cameo. We are the statewide network of, I think at this point, about 160 organizations that provide business assistance and financing to primarily low and moderate income individuals who are self-employed and starting businesses.
That's great.
Awesome. And then we got, let's just do one more there.
There's one in front.
Oh, okay, one back here, and then we'll do one more.
And my company is called Lumen, and we build entrepreneurship programs that ignite every individual's capacity to identify and actualize on opportunities. So that spans all the way from the innovation teams all the way down to alternative workers.
All right, we do one. Okay, one here, and then one last one.
I'm Julie Motz. I'm a healer, and I'm mostly concerned with the work of parenting, because I think it is both the most destructive and creative work that happens in our society. And I think anything that looks at the future of work and doesn't look at how workers can be supported in being parents is doomed to fail.
Hi, my name is Ohad Pressman. I'm fascinated by these trends on two levels. One, in the sense of seeing smaller and smaller groups of people achieving more with less, and to that end, I tend to start companies with that spirit. Our last company serves over 1 million micro entrepreneurs with just 4 founders and no employees, and so to that extent, we just see that as a trajectory and excited to participate in that.
Transferable skills. I worked in a company I started 20 years ago, understanding the power of your transferable skills, which was led by the work of Gary's dad, Dick Bowles, with What Color's Your Parachute? So I don't do that full time right now. I do green energy projects, but I'm still very much involved in transferable skills.
Now, here's the one thing I want to do here. I'm going to jump now to the 30 seconds here. We're going to start moving into our 5-minute segments here, which is going to be a bunch of them here. But opening up a lot of time to interact. And what I wanted to actually do is to set the context for essentially this project and essentially this evening. And so we all kind of get on the same page, because what we don't want to do is just, again, start spinning our wheels on going in the weeds or something. And I want to start right off by saying the perspective of this project is that we are in a rare moment of what's happening in the country here, a fundamental shift in technologies, economy, and essentially the politics of this country. It's very much on the par of like when we introduced new technologies in the early 19th century, the economy changed, and basically the work had to change. We watched it around the turn of the mid-century there, around the Civil War. Steam power changed the way the economy worked, changed the way the work went. We saw it with electricity. We saw it building, skyscrapers, pulling people into cities, boom. All the different changes there. We saw it with the expansion in internal combustion engine and all the stuff we know about the interstate highway system. We've seen this over and over again. We're in one of those now, if not even a bigger shift, the digital global economy that's coming. Now, the one thing I want to just point out is every one of those periods not just had that fundamental economics changes and fundamental changes in the nature of work, they had fundamental political and policy changes. These are just the faces that are associated with the beginnings of all those eras. But every one of those required fundamental shifts. And I would say we're in one of those now. My own feeling, the period started early 21st century. I would go, Mama, we're in this kind of crazy period right now. Who knows where it's going? But in general, the point is we're in one of these things now. So the quick kind of way of thinking about that. The second piece about this that I want to just stress is that we watched something happen around 1980. This is essentially the rise of technology-driven productivity since the war, basically, and here is essentially the median family real income. We saw a fork happen about 1980. Something fundamentally happened. There was something about technology. We know the introduction of computers and increasingly the internet. Look at that productivity go up, by the way, by right around the mid-90s here, boom. And we also watched something, so there's globalization, technology, and something we know, there was a shift around politics here as well, and the policy. This gap, though, is unsustainable. So we're just saying there's something fundamental that has to be reworked here. There is an ascendance of a new kind of commanding heights of the economy. And this is extraordinary. These are things that you folks know, but just think about the power of this, what happened. This is the 5 most valuable companies at the turn of the century, 2001. That is a snapshot of essentially what the 20th century economy was. Walmart, Citibank, ExxonMobil, GE, perfect, Microsoft, right? 5 years later, Microsoft loses a little ground, but it's pretty much the same commanding heights. 5 years later, 2011, Apple replaces the one tech company, and this is essentially oil is dominating in 2011. And this in 2016 is the 5 biggest, most powerful companies in the world today. All of them technology companies, all of them, frankly, based on the West Coast here. And these companies are surging, and they're not going to die anytime soon. The point about this is the tech world today, the entrepreneur world associated with that, has the responsibility now. They are driving everything, essentially, at the top level there. And we have to take this kind of leadership seriously. It's not just about those 5. There's all kinds of these companies, including Intuit and others there. This is essentially the time where we have to we, in the broadest sense, again, technology entrepreneur space, has to really start doing something differently, take more responsibility for what's happening here. The second thing that happened, I just want to point out there are a few things here to just get people going. Something also happened in 1980 is we started watching all routine jobs flatline, and anything to do with non-routine cognitive, essentially brain jobs, started rising, and we also started to see non-routine manual like baristas not running, but basically the flatlining of this. So the economy started to shift in 1980, and essentially this old 20th century economy stagnated. That is going to get worse. Something else happened, the atomization of the economy. It started to atomize it started in the 80s, it was like these temp workers, and it's contract workers, gig workers now. A full third of the economy now is people in this space, independent workers. And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit later, that's growing, and it's going to grow quite dramatically potentially here too. The second thing is, more than that are now people are bringing in more than one income. More than 1/3 of Americans now have to bring in multiple income sources. And again, our politics, our policy, and the way companies work have not evolved to keep pace. And then, of course, it's the specter of AI coming here and the arrival of advanced robotics. That's going to cause all those routine flatlining jobs are even going to get slashed even deeper. We're going to see probably many more people move into this essentially atomized economy. And in fact, we have to start preparing for this. All these kind of thoughts here, half of U.S. jobs might be vulnerable to automation. Now, I am not a doomsday sayer. Our thinking is that essentially the economy is going to reinvent itself. Part of this process is reinventing how we actually deal with these independent workers. And to kind of make one point I just want to make here, which I love this quote from John Maynard Keynes, is to go back to the last time our economy went into this kind of situation was essentially a fundamental breakdown, was essentially back in the Great Depression and World War II. Essentially, this is an essay he wrote in 1930, Keynes. He said, "We are suffering just now from a bad attack of economic pessimism. It is common to hear people say at the epoch of enormous economic progress which characterized the 19th century, the one previous, is over, that the rapid improvement in the standard of life is going to go down, at least at any rate in Great Britain, the great power of that time, that a decline in prosperity is more likely than an improvement in the decade which lies ahead of us." Yet he said, "I believe that is a wildly mistaken interpretation of what is going to happen to us. We are suffering not from the rheumatics of old age, but the growing pains of over-rapid changes from the painfulness of readjustment between one economic period and another." I think we're in another one of those, folks, and I think it's up to us to actually start thinking fundamentally on how we actually, because of course he was right. We had the greatest expansion after World War, the great post-war expansion. It was actually phenomenal. And their perspective in the 30s was completely misplaced. And essentially, I would say, particularly on the West Coast here, the future's hitting hardest. A lot of this tech energy is out here, all the entrepreneurialism here, California. We actually owe it to ourselves to really start getting serious about changing not just what the companies in the tech sector does, but also what the policy and our politics do as well. So anyhow, with that, that's the big frame. That's where we start. We can push back later, but the frame is we're starting from this place in this project. Now we're going to go to Gary, who's going to notch a notch lower about the future of work landscape. Give us a little bit of where we're playing, and then we're going to go ahead. Yeah?
Okay. So I've been lecturing and writing about the future of work for the past 4 or 5 years. And I actually, as Mark was saying, I was trained as a career counselor when I was 19. My father wrote job hunting books. As a matter of fact, he was a minister who was fired up here at Grace Cathedral and ended up writing what's known as the world's career manual. So I think a lot about how individuals can find meaningful work and how to be able to navigate during disruptive times. And so what we've done with Heidi and my work with Charette is we sort of tend to approach what we think of as wicked problems and try to help people deconstruct understanding how those problems sort of exist and how what the various trends that are affecting them, and then to start thinking about the solutions domain. And so I wanted to just walk you through a little bit about how we tend to think about this. So we try to help people to think about, first off, what do we say are the macro trends? Like what can we say are essentially facts about the changes in the landscape? Secondly, how do we look at the impacts of those on various populations, on our economy, on the planet? And then finally, what are the scalable solutions? So that's on sort of one axis. And then on the other axis, what are the areas, what are the arenas in which we're seeing that there's an impact? And so here's a one way to look at this. So people who've seen me do these types of talks before know I love grids. So what are the macro trends across the top? What are some of the challenges that we're facing? And then what are some of the solutions that we can think of? And so these are just sort of first, top of mind kinds of things. So for instance, one of the macro trends, we know that there's a really significant shift from rural areas into cities. We've got about 50% of all the population in the United States right now are in cities, and by 2050, it's projected to be anywhere from 75 to 80%. And so what that means is, picture every small town that you know of hollowed out by another 50%. And so unless we start to think about ways to be able to help them become more viable economies given these shifts. And so obviously things related to the impact of reduced economic mobility, people having less and less income in those areas. And then what are some of the ways we can think about some of the solutions? And so what do we know? What can we factually point to? What kinds of strategies do we see that are starting to help people to be able to mitigate some of those challenges? And so I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but really as you think about your place in this map, you think about the kinds of populations that you care about, you think about the shifts that are occurring from socioeconomic, as Carl was saying, the shift in education, the issues related to how work itself is becoming unbundled. That's from a concept from a guy named John Hagel is at the Light Center for the Edge. So I've actually written a series of papers on this on medium.com on unbundling work, unbundling higher education, and so on, that can give you some of that background framing if it's helpful. And then finally, what's happening within organizations. And so not just thinking about the problem domain, which is where a lot of this dialogue tends to focus, but then start to focus on the solution domain. And obviously, there are a range of different issues within each of these boxes. But this is one way to start thinking about what are the problems that you see? What are the kinds of issues that you want to focus on most? How does that fit? And then we know that all of these types of solutions, we know a lot of this energy is actually connected. That the ways we can solve these problems is by bridging across silos and by trying to help people to reduce duplication and increase impact. And then, of course, across all this landscape, in addition, then you've got technology trends, issues that we feel are both changing the landscape and then technologies that can actually be guided to have a positive impact on these changes as well. So we're going to post this on the Reinvent site, but hopefully that's just one way to think about the landscape. And so this is the macro for a lot of the changes across the landscape of the world of work. Now I'm going to ask April to come up and to talk specifically how this is anchored, what the issues are for the independent worker.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Pete. Welcome, everybody. So happy to finally have this evening here. And we're going to shift now, just for a couple of minutes, from looking at the overarching future of work landscape to look specifically at what it means for independent workers. So freelancers, independent contractors, self-employed, and a whole range of flexible work arrangements. And I'd love to know, we did a nice lightning round there of a lot of you, how many of you here would consider yourself independent or freelance or? Okay, just take a look around. I'm just curious, but that's fantastic. Now, keep in mind, too, that for most of human history, most workers were independent, right? We had hunters and gatherers and farmers and merchants and guilds. And then about 250 years ago, as Pete was saying, the Industrial Revolution began, and along with that came our first notion of employment and the rise of a new kind of social contract. Over the next 2 centuries, that industrial model that was based on production, consumption, ownership, and employment took root. Most workers could expect to be full-time employees, often working for one or two companies their entire career. They and their families could expect stability and progress. And then, thanks to the big shift, the great unbundling, et cetera, over the last 2 generations, we've seen this reality is gone. Job security is a myth. In the US, average job tenure is about 3 to 5 years. And while overall, as Pete said, while overall growth in terms of productivity and GDP has increased, income and job prospects for typical workers have faltered. At the same time, though, we're seeing this emergence of new technologies and new ways for people to earn income online and offline, which is spurring an expansion and a resurgence in independent work. So I want to just give a snapshot, focusing on 3 aspects of independent work tonight. First, sheer growth. Pete, you mentioned 53 million. It's actually 55 million, 53 last year, 55 this year, 35% of the US workforce. That number is slated to grow to 40% by 2020 and 50% by 2030. So within 1 generation, most workers will be independent. Moreover, independent workers contribute over $1 trillion to the US economy today. Second, diversity. We have independent workers, obviously men and women, young and old, blue collar and white collar, urban, suburban, and rural. We have data scientists, we have designers, we have hairdressers and handymen, we have technologists, we have teachers. Every vocation imaginable has an independent component to it. We find roughly parity between men and women, and also roughly parity between who works full-time and part-time. We do find that freelancers and self-employed are slightly more ethnically diverse than the typical workforce, and it runs across the political spectrum. 45% of independent workers reported voting for Hillary Clinton, 33% reported voting for Donald Trump. The last point, we've got growth, we've got diversity, and we've got complexity. So estimates show that roughly 2/3 of independent workers opt in. They're doing this as a deliberate choice. That leaves 1/3 that are doing it for some other reason, often some kind of necessity. We find that 80% of independent workers feel much more empowered, engaged, excited about the day, and that they're living a balanced life. Roughly the same percentage find that they can earn more income as an independent than they could in their previous job. And they tend to be more optimistic about the future. But along with this complexity comes a whole bunch of tensions, and I think I don't need to tell you guys about the tensions, but I'll just point out one. It's this ongoing debate between stability and flexibility. So employees have stability, but they sign away their flexibility. Independent workers have flexibility, but they sign away at least some of their stability. Yet it's interesting to note that the majority of independent workers actually feel on one level that they have more stability because they're not dependent on any single source of income, as you would be if you had a salary. Now, last but not least, I also probably don't need to state this, we are looking at a policy world in which the overwhelming majority of policies are outdated and outmoded for independent workers. So we've got issues around all kinds of insurance, obviously the social safety net, wages, debt, healthcare, childcare, you name it, and these issues are only going to get more significant and more challenging as independent workers grow and as technology evolves. So part of why we're here tonight is to launch this conversation. We need a new social safety net. We need a new kind of benefit that is universal, portable, and flexible. And we need to cast a new lens on the trends that are going on so that, as I said in my introduction, how I like to frame it is how we can create a future of work that works for everyone. So welcome, and back over to you.